So critical for us is to really understand the localized needs of the country, and that's what a lot of entrepreneurs are doing. They are not standard like picking up what the global companies are doing. They are localizing it, understanding what the applications are, and then coming up with solutions. Because we are in a unique position where we need solutions which are fit for us. So say for e-rickshaw, for an example, this is EV already, and this will be the disruptor in the future. And for us, it's important that we understand that application so well and come up with a solution which not only Uberizes that whole community. Can you imagine the e-rickshaw which are standing on MG Road are linked to a consumer who is coming down of the MG metro station, rather than they standing in a line and then fighting for that passenger load, is already booked for his 10 rupee ticket to move to a point A to point B.
Yeah.
So these are huge opportunities for the future.
True.
But one startup is doing that in Gurgaon now. They're actually working on this.
Yeah.
It's terrific, actually, and I'll come to you because you talked about water being one of the bigger challenges. But tell us about what you think we are doing right, and any other thing that we are not doing right.
Well, from my vantage point, we're doing a lot of things right.
Okay, that's really encouraging to hear. So tell us some more.
Because in our world, right? I mean, we're in financial services, and in our world, going back, I think to a point that Nishant made, that India has historically kind of lagged in technology adoption. In our world, that's absolutely not the case. In fact, we are leading the world in technology adoption. We are doing things, and I use we in a very broad sense, because a lot of it is actually government-led initiatives, which are creating the framework and the infrastructure for development which is not available anywhere else in the world. So, just simple examples, right? UPI, Bharat QR, just have revolutionized the payment space in a way that has not been done anywhere else.
Yeah.
And what is very important here to understand is that the whole challenge of this fourth industrial revolution is how do you make the tools available to a very broad population? Because it is easy, as we've already seen with the success stories of the West, it's very easy to end up in siloed successes, right? Where you have single entities that end up controlling a lot of resources and then become natural monopolies as a result of that. And what the Indian government has done essentially is, in a very, very concerted way, try to break through those tendencies to create natural monopolies, right? So, for instance, we used to have wallet companies in India, right? E-wallet companies were a huge source or a huge destination for capital, because they were all seen as kind of building up these walled gardens which had consumer information and payment information all in one place, and they could mine that data and nobody else could get in. So that's how Paytm became so big and attracted so much capital. And then the government came out with UPI, which basically destroyed the advantage of wallet companies and made it a level playing field for anybody who wanted to be in that space. And similarly with Bharat QR is another big example. It hasn't really gotten the kind of attention or adoption which I suspect is going to happen over time. But basically, again, QR codes are a walled ecosystem everywhere else in the world, right? Where you want, if you want to use Apple Pay, then the vendor had better be signed up for Apple Pay, right? If you want to use Samsung Pay, the vendor had better be signed up for Samsung Pay, otherwise you can't use it. They're not interoperable, right? Bharat QR has, again, decimated that. It's basically interoperable standards across the platform. And so I think what the government has done, and this extends to beyond just the financial and technologies and payment space, right? To your point about drones, digital skies is something which is, again, very unique to India. It's really not been done anywhere else in the world, where the government is again setting out these parameters of how drones may operate, right, without having to file flight plans in advance and knowing exactly what they're going to do, basically set up the ecosystem to allow drones to function relatively easily. And so I feel that the government has done an enormous amount to basically change platforms, right? In the West, platforms are what are called rent seekers, right? You create a platform, you now control it. Anybody else who wants to get onto it has to pay you rent to be able to use it and build their business. And I think the Indian government has basically created a much more democratized platform where other people can come out and build their business on without having to pay a high amount of rent to get into that business. So I'm actually very, very happy about how this.
We all share your happiness because I can now pay all my bills, sitting at home or from my phone, even when I'm traveling, and we don't have to go anywhere else. But
I mean,
how do you?
I'm sorry, just to elaborate on that in a little bit. Nowhere else in the world, at least to my knowledge, right, can you apply for a loan, get a credit approval, and get money in your bank account in a matter of minutes. And that is actually happening in India today because we are doing it. And it's not possible anywhere else in the world because the architecture doesn't exist.
Yeah, actually, we had another finance company in another discussion who said that there are too many regulations and then we could do everything digitally in no time at all, but the regulations hamper us, and so we continue to remain a phygital company rather than being a digital company, but we'll come to that.
So, the good thing, like what you said now, is that the late adopters of technology who got left out in the earlier days will kind of catch technology faster because the world will equalize and all the technology products will kind of come to the different countries at the same time. And the guys who haven't had it will feel the biggest need, and that's why all these things happen. My considerations are 2 or 3 in what we have done so well and what we should do more of. If you go back in time, slightly 10 years back, the big IT boom was led by a liberalization and change in the education policy, which allowed for the so-called engineering colleges to flourish right across the country, led by, let us say, Manipal was the epitome of privatized government, college education. The key question which we have to ask ourselves is, are we putting in the right education system which will get the skill sets for the future? Right, we talked of drone technology, we talked of robotic programming, we talked of smart building management, we talked of data analytics and so on. I just refer back to 3 days back or 4 days back Times of India, the Times University advertisement which says that a 100-year-old university prepared you for X thing, but what will prepare you for the next 10 years? I think that's the first question we need to ask for our future generations. So where are we on education is one thing which we must always look for. We did something well, are we doing enough of it into the future? The second thing which strikes me is as a country, and this is a personal view, not a company or a business view, because I've heard many of you speak from an industry perspective. I'm taking a slightly societal view on today's discussion, is we are still caught in a bit of meritocracy vis-a-vis affirmative action territory.
Okay.
So if you want to really make a progress and be part of the new age which doesn't recognize any of these things, as a country our mindsets needs to change somewhere in this.
That's really difficult. That part, that is a really big challenge. The affirmative action.
I was on a train yesterday, coming back from Agra, the fastest train in India, Gatiman Express, 100 minutes from Agra to Delhi. I felt so proud. The train was delayed by 100 minutes because a tree fell on the track, and I got talking to this guy who was sitting opposite to me. He was MSc, this side talk, but I'll come back to the main talk. He was MSc in biotechnology, and he teaches Hindi literature in some college in Delhi. I got very intrigued and asked him, what do people who study Hindi literature do in life? It was a very offensive question in some sense, but he lectured me for 1 hour without a proper answer of how it will generate economic activity. So somewhere links to education in some sense, of what we are still teaching our people and so on. There is merit in what is there in the stuff we do today, but we look at the future as well. And this is where we had a talk into meritocracy vis-a-vis affirmative action, because he said every 5th year I'm reminded who I am, which caste I come from, and whom I should vote for, and so on and so forth. So that's what provoked my thought as a societal impact point of view. The third is on regulation simplification. You talked of everything being nice, but I would like to have flexibility. From a medical industry perspective, we have the new Clinical Establishment Act, which is essentially a license Raj. Right? I was in telecom in the past, and I can tell you that the whole TRA, DOT, audit assessments is nothing but an audit Raj. Right? Why do you need circles in telecom? You should just migrate to cloud and keep everything in cloud, right? Technically. But you still have circles and all the kind of configurations just to kind of keep the employment cycle and the babudam going in some sense. So the real question which we have to answer as a country and for the government specifically is, this world does not recognize nations. It is only Google Play Store and Apple Play Store. Any app developed is immediately absorbed. You don't have to go through a customs officer who will check the licenses and so on and so forth, right? So the role of government will struggle in the future, giving up control and keeping control. There is some bit of noise which I haven't heard before, including some very senior industry leaders from your own business talking about the need to have Indian data in India. Right? Even yesterday's newspaper carries this article. We are talking of a digital world, right? We just went some time back all being glorious, but now the government is saying the data is Indian, right? Facebook is Indian.
True.
So these are some of the things we just need to ponder over and.
So Bharat, just to clarify, are you saying we should not be having MSc or Hindi literature?
I'm not saying. I'm just saying what does it lead to is what we prepare the education, the population for, because. On one hand, each one of you spoke about, at the heart of it was, it is good for the consumer from a consumption perspective, but it will eliminate jobs. This was the tone which I heard multiple number of times. We have people who are doing this X number of times in the press. Now, 6 weeks of man days has been shrunk to web crawlers and so on and so forth, right? So someone has lost his job. I was just thinking of it in Bombay. If you would go to any building, there was a lift man who would sit and close the door and open the door, right, for you. You don't find him anymore because the lifts have become smarter. They can sense where your hand is going and so on. So we are eliminating jobs on one hand. So what are you going to teach the population? Right?
So I'm actually going the other way. I think it's important that we have more Hindi literature type of stuff being taught, because I think in the post fourth industrial revolution world, I think the skills that are important are not going to be specific skills of being able to do something. It'll be the creativity and the ability to think laterally and interdisciplinarily. And I think we lose a lot when we don't focus on things like Hindi literature.
No, I agree, but the question is the educational reforms today, and what are you going to talk about on the education side? It's the starting point of a societal.
Sure. So I have two examples, which I'm not saying that you're disagreeing with this, but last summer we had an intern visiting us from Princeton. We have a program with Princeton where they send us 6 or 7 interns every year, and so last summer we had this kid come in and he spent 2.5 months, and we gave him a data science project, and he worked on it and he figured it out and he kind of learned Python. He never programmed in Python. He learned Python. He did a bunch of work and came up with a result, which was actually kind of interesting for us to look at. And at the end of that, we said, okay, that's great. So, what do you do? What kind of computer science courses have you done? He said, I've done no computer science courses at all. I said, oh, what's your major? He's a philosophy major. He's a philosophy freshman who has just, because he's been exposed to things, because he's creative, he's inquisitive, and has been taught that way, right, he was able to pull together the tools that he needed to do the work and teach himself how to get there.
Right.
There's another data science group out of Washington, D.C. that we work with very closely, and they are hardcore data science engineers, right? Their most important employee is an art history major.
Why?
Because the key to data science is not knowing the techniques. The key to data science is being able to ask the right questions. Because once you've asked the right question, somebody can always go in and program it to make it work, right?
Right.
And the right questions need to be asked by people who can think outside the box.
Programming is after the thinking. You have to
Exactly.
think first and then program, right? In
Right.
fact, your point also brought to me the very stark fact that most of our best engineers actually go into IIMs and become managers and salesmen instead of building the country, which is why even the quality of engineers in our country and the buildings that roads and everything, there are lots of lacunae everywhere. But we were wondering in the beginning how many telecom, who's from telecom in this group, and it turns out there are a lot of people, from telecom, apart from the person who is officially from telecom. So you tell us, Alka, about this. What are the things we are doing right, and of course from your telecom perspective, it would seem we are doing a lot of things wrong. But you tell us, your view.
No, I don't think we are doing a lot of things wrong. What I think is that there are two aspects of adopting technology. One is problem solving, and the second is the adoption of technology to increase the level of living. Just the standard of living, whether you can call it your healthcare or your transport or whatever. So technology comes in to improve the living as such. The other part of technology has to be brought in for solving specific problems. India in general does both, but at a very narrow level. We have, for reasons because of numbers, because of the spread, because of variety, because of disparity, we have not been able to broad base this or universalize this even within India. So if a problem is solved, it is solved for a very minuscule level and it's not really broad based. So Cochin could be an airport which does not need to buy power. But have we replicated it? The answer is no. There was a railway station which was made completely accessible, which was again in Kochi incidentally. The first one, I think it was Trivandrum, sorry. It was the first one. Until date, it is the only one. We don't do it, and it's because of technology that the first one happened. But we left it at that, and it has been 7 years. And it is belonging to an entity, the government of India, by the way, who swears by it, that we have to make it accessible. It's a law, and it is still not there. There are rules which say that yes, railways has to be accessible. It's still not there in all the other, railway stations. So yes, we solve problems. Yes, we deploy technology, but we don't broad base it. Similarly, for improving the standard of living, yes, we come out with technologies. We adopt them. We have 4G, which was meant to increase the data rates and all that. But go outside of Delhi and you'll be hard pressed to even get a signal, forget about 4G. And I'm not talking of a particular operator. I happen to carry all the operators in my pocket most of the time. It doesn't happen. It's not about, what is good generally on paper. It has to come and get implemented. So the intent has always been there, and intent is there in all the verticals, all the silos, amongst all the minds who are working on it. But are we able to deliver it? That's the biggest question that we need to answer. And in fact, all the revolutions have to really be effective. Now that effectiveness part, we either don't measure or we don't bother about it. There are positions which have been created. So there's an infrastructure in charge in Gurgaon. Everybody who comes from Gurgaon will laugh over it that there is an infrastructure in charge. Where is the infrastructure? I mean, where are the roads? There are no roads. But yes, we did make those underpasses in Gurgaon, which I think was an amazing piece of work. They were made in very good time as compared to what happens in Delhi. And it was, it actually allows you to zip through. But if you look at it closely, there is a roof over it, which kind of extends to a kilometer together on both sides. And you start asking questions to yourself, why has this been made? I mean, it's a roof on the road.
Sorry, you touched a very raw nerve with me. The underpass is a big peeve with me
Yeah.
because they don't allow the bottom of the society to travel. They run across the road, jump on this wire bars which they have put up now, and put lives
Yes.
in danger to do this. So it's not built with thinking behind it.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is that the
That's because
building part
all the
happened.
best engineers go to the IIMs.
No, even, the point which he was making about education is this, that if you are giving an engineering degree and later on, I mean, whatever may be the institute, the basic quality of engineer has to be there. He is there to solve a problem using technology. Is he doing it or is she doing it is something which everybody has to be accountable for. And that is a big piece which is missing. We are not measuring our own effectiveness. There is no accountability for most of the roles that we have in society, which is, very necessary to put in the right perspective before we start jumping onto the bandwagon of the next revolution.
Can I
Okay.
quickly add something? I mean, on the original
Of
question
course.
around positive things and good things happening. I think NASSCOM is doing a good job in terms of coming up with this platform called Future of Skills, right? And what they are doing is for all the technologies that we are talking about, what are the skills needed, and can we lay down a roadmap for how can you go around building those skills? This is going to get launched very soon, and I think having seen a initial demo of how it's going to work out, it is something that will sort of lay down how do we address the education gap and skill building gap using that platform. So a very good thing to keep an eye on.
But just to add, Alka, on some of the broad-based things, so there are some poster boys. I would say Metro is one poster boy that they sort of replicate things across, and
Yeah.
and some of the stuff I was talking earlier about, all metro stations are now green actually. I mean, they do that. India is now sitting on some 5.4 billion square feet under green. So there are some, but I agree with you. How can we have an ecosystem where some of those good practices like a Kochi airport get replicated across all new airports? And that's something
Completely.
clearly missing from that.
Yeah, scale and broad basing. I think
Yeah.
scale comes from
in fact,
organizations.
I would just add, whilst there's so much to do, and India is a large geography as well as a large number, there are pockets which have shown change. For example, I'm sure all of us have passports, right? We've all been to this passport office 15 years ago and now. There's a huge change. Everything is transparent now. I mean, I'm amazed at the speed at which it happens and the transparency at which it happens compared to 10 years ago when you didn't know what the hell was happening to your passport.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and similarly, I don't know if I'm one of those unlucky ones. Every year I get, for my income tax returns, my return gets picked up for scrutiny, right? And now it's on email. The correspondence is on email.
On email.
And I'm up to date. As of last year, I'm completely, my file is closed.
Yeah.
They have queries, it's answered. So I think there's lots of change happening, but are we happy with with the space and the richness? Certainly not. I think there's lots to do.
Sure. I think, given the pace at which we are talking and the pace at which time is passing away, if we stay with the difficulty and challenges and thing of our country, we'll probably end up, eating up all the time. So let's move on to the next part, which is basically what about our organizations themselves, So the big thing, one of my big learnings, during this last 3-4 months over, doing several of these roundtables, is that there is a huge distinction between the digitization of the third industrial revolution when there was the computers and IT, and the digitalization of technology today in the fourth industrial revolution, which is something even the definition of digitalization is being debated, but it's probably generally now understood. So the question is, how many of our organizations really understand that, that kind of differentiation, and the question of technology, not just a CRM, but predictive, right? In terms of how you can do your business better, how you can manage, how you can bring things down from, productivity up and bring timelines down. So let us just talk a little bit about, maybe you, Vijayant, you can start off this particular, because you're looking at, so many industries together. Organizations need to have a correct, proper way to think through a digital strategy to become a digital organization. And very few digital organizations really in worldwide. I mean, I'm not talking of India necessarily, but how are you seeing different industries taking to this? And what is the right way to go about building a digital strategy for an organization that, let's say, is starting to think today?
I think the place to start is your customer. So, I mean, if you look at the customer today, he himself has different expectations. He's digital anyway, he's connected. So, the expectation of most companies' customers itself is completely different. And if they find that the experience they have with a particular organization is not the same what they get with, say, WhatsApp, an interaction, or even Facebook for that matter, they expect that, and that's table stakes now. So I mean, they expect that organizations they deal with will be digital, they will be responding in real time, they would be proactive. They don't want to be talking to somebody. They would expect a lot of automated responses, to be taking care of mundane tasks and those sort of things. So I think a good space to start is actually understanding what your customer wants, because the customer has changed. And we have seen organizations who have not understood their customers actually, being outflanked by maybe a startup coming in there and doing the job. But eventually, us as customers, we have changed, and I think it's the same with our customers. So the core of a digital strategy actually is your customer. If you look at your customer, what they want, possibly, you frame a strategy around that. That's a starting point.
So start thinking of your customer and then start with the technology, or start with the process?
It's a combination of both. So the good thing is there's lots of technology available today, lots of options, a lot of platforms you can go with, and then you would have to look at the process as to how do you actually put that together, get other fundamentals there. But I would think it's a combination of both.
That's a big challenge also, because by the time you realize what you need to do, there are others who have sped ahead of you. Right?
Exactly.
Just, when you talk of start with the customer, what I have realized is that even to have the ability within the organization to think outside in from a digital perspective is a starting challenge.
Exactly.
Because when I look at myself, I was competent deficient in this whole space. And when I look at my wider organization, there is a huge competence deficiency in this whole space. Now, when we are operating with such a black box where we don't know what we don't know, then our tendency would be to operate with the customer the way we know it. We don't know what we don't know. And I think that's where I see it as a starting point. How do I build competence within myself and within my leadership, or get skill within the organization? First, the realization that this is important. There will be disruption in my industry. Get the skill in, and then the process will start. What is my consumer expecting? What is my channel? And how do I make the consumer journey? I think there is this whole piece where I strongly believe that it's very, very critical.
It's like getting curiosity back on the table. So we need to get curious again, understand what the customer, and like you said, we don't know that. It's actually fundamentally changing the way everybody thinks.
It's also a question of how do you know what skill to bring in if you don't know what you're going to do.
We don't know. Yeah. So just, you made that point, or someone made that point about, air conditioning switched on from that flight.
Yeah.
I was in a remote area in Punjab, and I just asked, it was an air conditioned shop, and I said, how's Lloyd's doing? And he said, you'll be amazed the uptake that the brand has picked up just because of the aspiration of the community here. It was Khanna for a smart air conditioner.
Right.
The aspirations and how they are being met with technology is quite fascinating.
Might have even Amitabh Bachchan might have something to do with that, given that he is the brand ambassador of that particular.
So actually, if I may, I'm not so sure I agree with this. I think starting with the process and saying that this is how I'm going to do it is a very third industrial revolution way of doing things.
Okay.
I think you just have to go out and try a whole bunch of things and see what works. And so the key to it is measurement and tokenization and data capture. So all the tools, as you mentioned, right, that all the tools of AI and machine learning, they are all available at the click of a button, right? But you can't use any of that if you don't have the data to feed into it, right? And the only way you're going to become data-driven is if you actually capture the data. So for us, I think the starting point is not to define a process. It's not to say what kind of skills do we need. The starting point for us is let's capture as much data as we can so that then we can figure out what kind of skills do we need and what kind of process do we need to have in place.
Can I add something? If you
Yeah.
Very quickly.
I'll come to you after Pankaj.
Yeah, so what Gurpreet was saying, I don't know, that I don't know, it doesn't apply to digitization because I don't know is actually a black box. All of us know what it is, but the expertise in the youth is very high. So the dependence on them has to be explored, and that is where we need to get them into the mainstream and get those people who are very knowledgeable on this subject to come to the fore, and we listen to them and we implement those.
But there may be junior people in your organization. Would you listen to them?
Yeah, obviously we have to. Today, my 5-year child will know more than more than us on a mobile phone. If you have a problem on a mobile phone, you go to a 5-year child, he will plug it immediately. That is what is the truth. So if we have to learn anything on this, the latest, we have to go to the young generation and maybe the youngest of them, and they would be able to solve it much better because they've been born with those technologies, so they know it much more than what we have. So the question is not about for us to implement. Maybe we would be the same old people who had the resistance to change for computers. Today we have thinking that what about digitization? But then we have a resource available within our team itself who are the young blood, and they know much more than us, and we have to get them into the mainful, and it's the management of them that's, I think, more important.
It's true.
I would take the liberty of going back to the earlier point also, because then I was about to speak and then you changed it to the third point.
Sure,
so,
please.
The education system, it has to improve. I agree with what Bharat was saying. Today, the university education and everything, when we are going to artificial intelligence, when all the cars and the automobiles, all mechanical, electronic, IT, everything is merging together. We still have the specialization of BTech, mechanical, BTech, this. The integration is something which needs to be done today. The gap between the industry and the education has to be mitigated, and for that, it's very important that we change the entire education system in the country. The education system has not changed. It is still the same old way that we were studying. If you go to US and try to study, we have humanities, science, and complex and varied subjects we can take. In India, it's still the same. I am a science student or I am an arts student and I can't take physics. Whereas all those things have to undergo a change in the world where everything is becoming digital, everything is becoming very simplistic, at the same time complex. So we have to get the root cause of this problem that we are facing today is because the education system is very, very rigid, and their flexibility needs to be done. For example, in my trade, the electric vehicles which are there, the implementation of the electric vehicles has always been, we started at the same time when China started. China is far ahead of us. We have not been able to capitalize on that. We started with a two-wheeler. It failed miserably. All the companies who invested into got into a problem. And today, again, the government is coming into the fold to say, we want this electric vehicles to come and become more popular. But then, what has happened with the customers in the past, what baggage they carry, and what is the pool of talent that we have today, and what are we doing to create that talent in the country to develop these new technologies? If we have the rigid education system, it's very difficult to get them on board and come to the industry and try to face competition where everything is changing so rapidly, and we have a rigid education system where the person comes in and he specializes in only one small aspect of the business. So this is, I think, the foremost and the number one thing that we need to tackle immediately.
Absolutely.
And of course, the second thing I feel very important is, still the country is very male dominated.
Yeah.
Now, the female population of the country have to be given more opportunities and have to be brought into the mainstream, and that is where the growth will happen more.
Unfortunately, even our panel today is representative of that
At least you have
particular
one
thing,
today.
except Alka. There's nobody, from the
Yeah,
female
so
side.
sometimes I feel good about it.
Okay. That's why you're at the head of the table. No, but to your point, Nishant, just to come to you there also, to your point on allowing the junior people more say in how digital strategy should be done in an organization. So, we had this Varun Sridhar from Sher Khan. He came to our discussion in Mumbai, and he said that he had created a small team of digital natives. People who are young, dynamic, and they know digital technologies. They know what to do. And they were given Varun is a member of the board of directors. So that group was given the mandate of just do whatever you want, just like she was saying, you experiment and just come out with solutions to various things that we're doing. So they would come up with a solution, and the board would say, yeah, go ahead, and then they would go to IT, and then IT would then show them, security, compliance, this, that, and then they would all come back, ye to hone wala nahi hai, because there are so many issues. So it's also a question of our mindsets, that if there is something new that's coming up, then do we really go back to, governance issues, compliance issues, security issues, the very fear of trying out something new that might impact the organization on a larger scale, that is still there. But
I would say that, to plug this problem, the youngsters are there. You have to have a CEO who is also positive towards it, and he has to bridge that gap top to bottom and drill it
that
through.
is something that Anurag and OLX will be able to do better. But before I come to you, I want to have Nishant's view.
Very quickly, I won't take much time. So what some companies are doing is what they call as reverse mentoring. So younger generation mentoring the CXOs and CTOs, that's very common. The other thing I will say, that passport example, I think the benchmark is wrong. The new generation wouldn't have seen that stage. Right now, we are feeling happy that 15 years things were very bad and now they have moved to a better stage. But that benchmark itself will change in my view. To your question around how do we define a digital strategy, I think digital strategy, I see a lot of times the board members get very excited. So what are we doing about blockchain? But do we really need to do something with blockchain? And they create a lot of confusion in terms of the strategy. So digital strategy should not be seen separately. I think the core is your corporate strategy. And then you define strategies around data and digital and marketing and human strategy. And that's how you look at everything holistically rather than individually.
Okay.
Probably better for
I think your whole organization is digitally native, right?
Yeah.
So you are in a far more better position to talk about this.
Yes, I was waiting to jump onto this, but I'm glad I heard everyone out, and I'll build upon what Nishant said. So we, at our core, are a digital business, right? And end of the day, we've done a bunch of things like experiments, whether it's around marketing, reaching out to customers, etc. But one thing that we've learned is that, like you said, it needs to be tied closely to your business strategy. It's very easy to get into AI, look at data and try to do things. It's very easy to use social media to reach out. But what's important is to ask yourself, why do I need this digital strategy? Is it to increase productivity? Is it to improve your growth? Is it for a better consumer experience, right? Now, once you're clear about that, right, then it's a function of asking yourself, right, do you have the capabilities? And then what is happening? What is competition doing? Are they doing something which we need to be careful about, which we also need to kind of defend ourselves again? One thing that has worked for us is we also look 10 years ahead, as part of the bigger Naspers group, and we are a global company. We also try to predict where's the world headed and what is it that we should be trying to do today as experiments, while also making sure we go big on a digital strategy. So for example, if you think about classifieds, right, classifieds came into being in the 1990s from a presence on the computer, right? It was mostly on the desktop. And then OLX came into being in 2006. We started doing digital classifieds with focus on desktop and somewhat in mobile. If you look back, we in India actually started doing it on mobile much ahead of all the other markets. Why? Because the customers were on the mobile. And we saw that the growth of mobile would be much ahead or much faster than the adoption of desktop laptops, and there are multiple reasons for that. Once we did that, we also realized that while you can do all of this, you also need to make sure you're thinking ahead. So we said, we have our buyers and sellers on a platform. We also are collecting a lot of data about them. Now, can our digital strategy be such that we start leveraging the data that we collect, obviously keeping privacy in mind, and also start making it a more personalized experience for them, right? How can you help have the customer experience much more fruitful? So earlier people would just call us, and have discussions with the customer support team, but can we build chat on our platform, right? So that also starts becoming part of a digital strategy. So the point I want to make is, at the end of the day, if it is not tied together to your business strategy, you will do a lot of things, you'll put in a lot of resources, you'll get new capabilities, but it may still not deliver when it's measured. To your point, when you said it needs to be measured, it's extremely important. So last year we hired a bunch of AI, machine learning people, and we said, let's run a bunch of cool experiments, let's build some great products. And we did. The reality of the matter is our customers were not ready. While they seemed like cool features and cool products, it eventually didn't really lead to any business productivity growth for us, improving the customer experience, or necessarily moving to something which is more about monetization. So yeah, as a digital business, while we strongly believe in making sure that we have to go and do a bunch of experiments, we still realize that it has to be closely tied to what we really want to do as a corporate. And if there's no correlation there, you can kind of falter easily.
That's actually, there are two sides to it, but I'll come to that after Rajiv has a say.
Yeah, I have a point. In fact, I do agree with Vijay that
I think the mic needs to be closer to you.
okay, the customer is at the core of what we are doing. Like in our case, enhanced readership is one of our core values that we follow, and then second is the trust and influence, because that's where our advertisers believe in us, what we bring forth on the table. And to achieve it, at the core of our organization, the digital strategy is led by speed of execution and to do more with less. So because the costs are spiraling out of control now. So if we can't cap the cost through these digital initiatives, we won't be able to serve our customer in a much more better way than what we have been doing in the past. So you have to keep on innovating, and being almost an 180-year-old organization, we have survived by innovation. So it's continuous innovation we have to do. And I'll probably agree with Shiva on this data being a very core to our entire environment, because I think you must have all heard data is the new oil now, and every country will have to protect